Hello, I'm Robin Vincent and welcome to the September edition of Molten Music Monthly. It's a traditionally quiet time of the year, but even so I've managed to pull together a few bits and pieces that might interest you and hopefully take your mind off a world which is spiralling out of control. So coming up we have Newfangled Audio likes to play with our pendulums. Native Instruments goes dawless with Maschine Plus. You see I said Maschine as opposed to machine. You see I'm learning. I'm learning. Meanwhile Komplete hits Unlucky 13 and gives us a little bit more guitar rig. Arturia makes the KeyStep really good with some keys and bits and pieces. Sacrament Modular wants your soul with Cursible. Endorphines wants your rhythm with Queen of Pentacles. Handheld music gets serious with the DirtyWave M8. There's a bunch of virtual synth shows on the way. Instrument of Things lets us be everything in a module. Did anyone mention the Polybrute? Patch and tweak goes Moog. Moog then decides to drain all the colour out of the grandmother and the matriarch. IK Mixbox gives us an unexpectedly interesting box of effects. Instruo Lion enters the matrix. And Behringer reveals the Poly 800. But first, I want to talk about my own thing. I want to talk about DIY week. What's DIY week? Well, it's a week that I just decided to have where I thought I'll just do modular Eurorack DIY building all week. Do it all week, just for a whole week, like it's some kind of world holiday of DIY soldering and Eurorack making stuff. It's just me. I just decided to do it, and I'm inviting everyone to come along and kind of join in. So starting this weekend, starting on Sunday the 27th of September, for a full week, probably Sunday to Sunday. I don't know, I haven't quite decided yet, but for that week I'm just going to be focusing purely on making Eurorack DIY kits, and within that week, almost every night, I'm going to be live streaming that idea or associated ideas. What does that mean? Well, the first night, this Sunday night, rather than having our usual just chat about music technology and about the stuff that went on in this month, it's going to be focused on getting started with your first DIY project. So we're going to talk about the gear, talk about what we do, how we get stuck into that kind of thing, and just generally share some ideas about what it's like to build Eurorack kits. What we're talking about is soldering iron, bit of solder, a kit, resistors, capacitors, that kind of thing, and it works, and it's cheaper than buying modules. It's a way of learning more about electronics, learning more about the synthesizer that you're building, and puts you into this wonderful state of zen and meditation as you're slowly and methodically working your way through a kit. It's a fantastic thing. So I'm giving up a whole week to it in the hope that you'll be inspired to get involved yourself. So Sunday night we're going to have a chat about it. The rest of the week I'm just putting that together, and that will be published soon, exactly what the schedule is. But within that week we're going to be building a couple of kits together, the Frequency Central Stasis Leak and the Robo 3 PT. So I'm going to be building those, live streaming the entire build for however long it takes, and you can build along with us or watch it or drink beer or whatever while I solder stuff. I'll be doing an evening on the Deckard Stream. I'll be doing one on the Cosmo format, which is Sound Battle Look Mum No Computers format of Eurorack, which is just bigger and shinier and squeakier, and so I'm going to give that a bit of a go. I've also got an interview with Steve from Thonk. Thonk is a shop down in Brighton that sells kits and has been doing so for about 8 years. So within the week I'll also be building kits. I'll be putting up other content and bits and pieces that I can do as I do it. It should be fun. It's going to be mad. It's going to do my eyes in, I expect, and I'm hoping to breathe in a lot of fumes and to have a really nice time doing so. So that is what's coming up next week. So please, come along, join in. It should be fun. So at the beginning of the month, Newfangled Audio, also known as Eventide, or maybe Eventide distribute Newfangled Audio, I don't know, presented by Eventide, but written by who knows, Newfangled Audio, probably. Anyway, at the beginning of the month, they released something called Pendulate, which was this sort of weird and interesting and free little virtual synth that just was kind of odd, but in a really lovely way. It had this strange chaos engine, these dual pendulums which were the swinging and knocking together or something, creating oscillations which you then used to form the basis of your sound, and you then had some other stuff in there which you synthesis stuff in order to generate your sounds. It was great. It looked different, interesting, and kind of got us all very intrigued. And then a week or so later they went, "Wow, you like that? How about this?" And they released Generate, which takes that idea and expands on it. So you have 4 or 5, 6 different forms of chaos engine, these things which are colliding and smashing together and creating interesting waveforms. Those are then messed about with in a kind of a Buchla West Coast way, where it's not just filtering, it's low pass gating and wave folding and all those sorts of things that we don't really understand, but we quite enjoy playing with to some level. It's interesting in a number of ways because the presentation of it is something that's quite remarkable, and I don't think can be understated. I know that people don't like to be necessarily influenced by the look of something. Oh, it's all about the sound, man. Oh, I've heard that a lot recently. It's all about the sound. But honestly, for me, the sound is a large part. The visual interaction is a huge part of what interests me in a synthesizer, whether it's virtual or hardware. It just is. I'm a multifaceted person. I have more than ears, Anyway, so what was different about it was that the knobs were square. Now that seems like a simple thing. But we get so used to seeing a round knob, a parameter knob, a control knob, things like that go round in a circle, that when you're presented with something which doesn't, it's actually quite jarring, and it wakes you up and makes you go, oh. And so somehow in the breaking of that norm, it brings you in and engages you, and it goes, oh, all right, that's really interesting. The other thing they did is that the waveform display, which you can have in software very easily, is kind of superimposed over the front or the back of the parameters. So it's chaotic in the noise that it's making, but it's also chaotic in the visual, but in a really sort of brilliant way, as opposed to, initially you kind of think, oh, well, that's a bit odd. Well, no, that's quite, oh yeah, no, that's quite, I like that. And so you kind of go through this transition from this is odd to this is awesome. So you've got this waveform that's bouncing around right in the way of all your parameters, but that's okay because it's right in there and it feels very responsive and part of what you're doing. Does that make any sense at all? Out the other end you get synthesizer type noises. That's great. It's got a nice palette of sounds in there, things that you can do, but it works it's just the visual interaction and the way that you're starting to craft sounds. It suddenly made me interested in a software synth. That's quite an achievement in of itself, really, because there's very few that I actually want to use, and this one just came along and I went, I actually could play in this for a while, and in fact I might do so. It's arranged with the synthesizer at the top, modulators at the bottom, and you drag modulators in from the bottom into the top. You can display the cables or not, so you can see what things are doing, and things are moving and glowing. The square sort of knobs are glowing at you to show that modulation is occurring, and all of that's good. Comes with a bunch of presets. That's it really. It's just a good job. It disrupts your usual way of thinking about software synthesizers and manages to produce these really nice tones. And we don't necessarily get a lot of Buchla style synthesis within software synthesis. It's mostly subtractive. It's mostly the traditional form of oscillator, filter, envelope, VCA kind of rigmarole. Whereas this, it just gives you different ways of looking at things with functions and wave folding and modulations and the way it connects together. It's just nice. It's really nice. The only downside is you've got to have an iLock account. That's a bit of a bind. But other than that, awesome. Go and give that a go. Native Instruments have taken a Maschine and added a plus on the end. What does the plus mean? The plus means more. In some ways, they've stuffed a computer inside. That's what they've done to allow you to take your Maschine and bugger off and play with it all by itself. It's quite remarkable. I guess we kind of saw it coming. to some degree, because the whole idea of going dawless, of going without your computer, is just an enormous thing at the moment. That's what everyone is talking about, everyone is wondering about. And so this just seems to grab hold of that idea and go, yeah, all right then, how can we do this? Now, the thing to wrap your head around is that Maschine comes with a whole bunch of effects and instruments that you'd normally run on your computer. So if you're running stuff on your computer and making beats and putting your stuff together using the actually really quite good Maschine software, how do you then take that away and continue working? Because you're going to lose all your effects and lose all your stuff that's running on the computer. Well, Native Instruments have tackled this to some degree by being able to run certain instruments within the hardware itself. Now, unfortunately, I haven't really researched this very much at all. I just haven't had the time. So how are they actually doing that? Is it running on DSP? Are they just freezing them somehow and allowing you to continue mixing? I don't know. Maybe you can tell me in the comments and I'll need to read more about it. But the idea is that the computer within Maschine can run a certain amount of effects and instruments, so you can take it with you. Very, very interesting. So are we seeing Komplete turning into a hardware device? Very interesting. So yeah, I think that's great. I think I've always enjoyed Maschine. I used to have one a while ago. So but I like the workflow. I like the software. I like how that works. I think it's a great way of putting music together, and taking that away from the computer just simplifies it such a huge amount that I imagine you can get a lot more done. Restrictions is what we need. We like to be able to remove the computer and its bazillion presets and sit down with something that has a restricted feature set, and that way it's just easier. You spend less time surfing and browsing and more time actually making music. So I think it's great. I mean, it looks great. It's twice the price of the original because you've got a computer inside. But I think it's going to be very interesting. It's certainly an interesting development, which I can imagine is going to push other things in other directions. And we're going to see a lot more of this kind of thing. How exactly they're going to start cramming more instruments in, I don't know how that's going to work. But it's interesting, and I'm looking forward to finding out. Meanwhile, while we're talking about Native Instruments, let's have a look at Komplete 13. This is the latest one. It's been a couple of years since the last update, and so every couple of years they bring one along. And as usual, it annoys people because it never quite has exactly what you thought it should have, or as much as perhaps you thought it should have. But it's a phenomenal package of software. There's nothing quite like it. You get a huge number of instruments and effects and loops and sounds and stuff. It's really unbeatable. The only thing that slightly narks, I think, every time it comes along is that the price of the upgrade is the same regardless of what version you have. So you could have version 4 of Komplete and upgrade for the same price as the person on version 12, which just somehow doesn't seem right. And what that kind of does, it discourages you a little bit from upgrading. You think, well, I'm not going to upgrade this time. I'll upgrade in a version or two in another couple of years. I'll give it a go. I've certainly done that. I know plenty of people who have. But that aside, the bundle of stuff that you get is enormous, extraordinary. What does 13 bring to it? Well, actually not a whole lot of new stuff, to be fair. It encapsulates stuff that's come out since the last update, so things like the Super 8 and some of those dreamy wobbly effects, something to do with the violin, I don't know. But everything that's been released in between the last update gets sucked into that, along with a bunch of new effects, I believe, and of course a gazillion more sounds. There are various versions, from a simple cut down version through to the ultimate collector's VIP fan edition that has the world in there. More content than you could ever browse through. In fact, somebody should do a video of just browsing through the individual presets in Komplete 13, and I wonder how long that would take and how many people would watch past the first 5 minutes. The one sort of big upgrade perhaps in Komplete 13 is Guitar Rig 6. Guitar Rig, I've been playing with that for years. I've still got the foot controller back from the day, back in the earlier version. It's great. I've always enjoyed Guitar Rig. I enjoy the way it sets itself out in this sort of rack way. It's not trying to look like an amplifier. It's not trying to look like something it's not. It uses software and the software interface, I think, really, really well. Well, with version 6, they've revamped the whole thing. Of course, it retains its look largely, but they've reworked everything, redone the engine, revamped, blah, 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 all that kind of thing. Haven't played with it yet, so I don't think it's quite out. It's one of those promises with Complete 13, a bit like Massive X was. But it's super interesting, super creative. I like it. I mean, you know, the two, Guitar Rig and Amplitude, they both definitely have their strengths and weaknesses. But there's something about Guitar Rig that I've always had a soft spot for. I like, you know, it's just in the simplicity of the interface. I'm not having to know everything there is to know about amplifiers in order to use it. I can just select an interesting preset, drop in something a bit wacky, and then have fun. I mean, that's good, really, I think. Arturia have released a new KeyStep. Yes, they have. I was all over this because I had one, which is exciting. I got in to do that whole launch day video thing, which is great. I don't get to do that very often, so it was very thrilling for me. While I'm sure for everyone out there, it was just like, oh, what, another flipping video on this thing. I mean, you know, they do it to death. You know, everyone releases one at once. I've got to watch Bo's one. I've got to watch Loop Pops. I've got to watch this guy's, and his. I mean, honestly, I know. I mean, you just don't know where to put your loyalties, do you really? But I don't care. I got a thing, and I was allowed to play with it. It's sitting here. So what is it? Well, it's a longer version of the KeyStep. I mean, the original KeyStep I thought was, oh, that's really useful. You can, you know, it's a little keyboard which you could play a little bit of modular with, CV out, bit of a sequencer, that kind of thing. Great, that's very useful. Thank you very much. It's a shame it's a bit kind of ugly and plastic looking, but you know, useful. Thank you. With the KeyStep 37. They've made it a much more desirable product, I think. It's just simply nicer. It's fuller, thicker, heavier. It looks like something a bit proper as opposed to something a bit kind of cheap and cheerful. And within it, the sequencing and the arpeggiating is actually really good. There's a pattern mode in the arpeggiator that just throws together a pattern based on the notes that you played. And it's good. It's very pleasing, very bassliney, very melody-like. It's great. It's good. A couple of extra knobs, that sort of thing. I don't know. I mean, the KeyStep, generally speaking, people really liked it. And so the KeyStep 37 takes something that's really good and just makes it that bit better. That's great. Really useful. In some ways, I mean, comparing it to the Pro, of course, the KeyStep Pro, which has 4 channels of sequencing stuff going on, this only has one thing. I mean, you can run USB, MIDI, and CV all at once, so you could run 3 different things, but you've only got the one sequence, the one pattern going on, and that does, you know, that feels restrictive. It's cool though. It's good. It's really good. But obviously the KeyStep Pro has 4 channels of stuff going on, but it doesn't have the advanced nature of the arpeggiator inside. So, you know, pros and cons. I'd like a 2-channel one. That'd be too much to ask. The Cursible is a 6-channel morphing effects matrix. Do I know what this is? No, not really, but it looks damn cool. It's designed to act as some kind of cross-modulating effect send, I think. It can morph sequences and mix voltages together through strange manipulations or something. It says here it goes through to a cadaver equi style mixing of sound sources or control voltages. I have no clue what that means. I think the idea is you have something coming in, either CV or audio, and then you can route that out of 6 send outputs. Go out through stuff, and then there's returns, 6 returns for those. So you can route out through different stuff and come back. And there's a big knob in the middle that you can swap between the different routings. What it's going to, what's coming back. Is it going out to there? Is it coming back to here? And each one morphs between it. So it's not a hard switch between stuff. It's a soft crossfade and cross-modulation between things, allowing you to route out to different processors, to different things, and mix in different ideas, and to bring all those back into that same module again. Something like that. What you get though is a big knob, bunch of lights around it, turn it, crazy noises happen. Yeah, that's what we like. Endorphines, Queen of Pentacles. A remarkable name, I think you'll find, for what is essentially an analog and digital sampling hybrid drum sound source synthesizer thing. It's a bit like Black Noir. Remember the Black Noir thing they did? 7 channels of percussion in a very dark and interesting module. Queen of Pentacles is the same kind of deal, but this time you've got 3 analog channels based on the TR-909, which is nice. So nice kick drum, snare, clap, and then you've got 4 channels of sample-based stuff. Put them on SD card, stick it in the back, and you've got banks of samples that you can use. Hi-hats, cymbals, noises, farts, anything you like you can stick in there. I mean, it comes with a whole bunch of samples built in that give you a very much a techno flavour, I suppose, to it, but they are immediately engaging and a hell of a lot of fun. Each one gives you control over volume, you've got control over pitch and decay, things like that. It's also got its own effects DSP engine built in, so you can route stuff out through all sorts of effects. It's got crunching and overdrive and a whacking great big low pass and high pass filter in the middle. It's great. I jumped on it immediately as soon as I saw it, because I've been thinking about Black Noir for a long time, going, I don't know. And then this one came along and it just felt like the sample side of it gave it something extra, gave it a versatility that I could latch onto and do something perhaps different with. I mean, probably for simplicity's sake, 7 channels of drum noises that are fixed or analog, so a little bit changeable, is probably really what I want. But oh hell, I was seduced by the idea that I could stick other samples in, and thought, hell, let's go for it. Let's go for that. So hopefully there'll be some videos of that, of me playing with that thing coming along soon, along with a full, nice, deep review. But it looks and sounds brilliant. I'm already having a wonderful time with it. Yeah, and yeah, sure, I'm producing techno. That's great. Yeah, that's great. But that's fine. I'm into that. But it can obviously do a whole lot more. It's just that is what you instantly take from it, I think, as soon as you plug it in. So yeah, a lot more exploring to do on that, but what a fantastic drum source, because I mean, looking at percussion sources in Eurorack can be difficult. You get individual modules for individual sounds, and that's right, because there's a lot of sound crafting that can go on, but you end up with this rack of drum modules, which is enormous. And although that's good and all, and I'm into that and everything, this just seemed to sort out a lot of the big chunk of percussion that's missing, I feel, in my rack, that's going to give me a place just to play straight away without having to muck about, without having to patch together and craft individual drum sounds. And that appeals to me. Sometimes simplicity is the answer, but it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. Oh yes, good lord. DirtyWave M8, or Mate, DirtyWave Mate. What an interesting little box. Handheld thing, looks just phenomenal. Great mechanical type buttons on the top, little screen. It's a tracker. It's a handheld tracker made by some guy who's been working on it for ages, sort of like in his spare time, and it's really coming to the point where it's going to get a release, and that's pretty exciting. See a lot of handheld Game Boy size things knocking around, and never really quite sure how versatile and useful those really are, whereas this looks like the bee's knees. It has a synthesizer inside along with 8 tracks in monophonic sequencing, all sorts of advanced modulation, and that lovely weird stuff you can do with trackers where you can just dictate where everything goes at all times to all places. For the sound source, they've created a bit of a chiptune engine, but also they've pulled the guts out of the Mutable Instruments braids and given it a whole stack of different sorts of oscillators. Combine it with a few effects and the touchscreen and button type interface, and you've got quite an awesome little handheld machine. It's designed by a guy called himself Trash80 and is probably going to be finding itself on Kickstarter by about the end of the year. Tends to be a bit of a season of synthesizer shows around this time of year, but of course, because of obvious reasons, that ain't gonna happen. But there are a few virtual ones coming along. The first one is the imaginatively named, right, get this, Synth Booth. Synth Booth, did you get it? Like Synth Fest, Super Booth. Synth Booth. This one appears to probably be the best organised of the lot that I've seen so far. Rather than just being a bunch of content and live streams like what I'm doing with DIY Week, rather than that, they're trying to put together what feels like a proper event. So they've got an exhibition space, they've got seminars and panels and performances all rolled together into one weekend. And rather than it just being dumped onto YouTube, they're actually selling tickets which buys you entry into the exhibitor space and to all the talks and performances. You can get in to chat to people, to chat to manufacturers and see what it is that's going on their booth. Exactly how that works, I don't know, but it sounds intriguing. And then, of course, you can sit down and watch the live streaming of the panel shows and the seminars, and they've got a whole bunch of lovely people in to do stuff, including Suzanne Kiani. They've got our Div Kid there, they've got Make Noise, they've got AI Synthesis, they've got Modular Moon, they've got the Galaxy Electric performing, all sorts of stuff going on. It does look pretty phenomenal. It's happening over the weekend of 16th to the 18th of October. Tickets are $25, which seems pretty reasonable. And they've got an entire schedule that's threaded between exhibition time, seminar, then a performance, more exhibition time, keynotes, that kind of thing. It just feels organised. It feels like official and professional and nicely done. So that's good. I mean, I love all the rawness of we're just getting to get on camera, live stream, interview people, stuff some content out there. I love all of that. I'm into all of that. The whole thing we did at Super Booth, the whole thing I'm continuing to do since that. Fantastic. Love it. But I don't mind something that's properly organised either, because you kind of feel that perhaps it's going to be more focused and you might get a lot more out of it. It'll be really interesting to see how that fares in comparison to other bits and pieces that have gone on. In the meantime, also coming up, I'm doing a bit of a thing with Befaco, where I'm jumping into something that they're doing in Spain. There's also SoundMit in Italy, which I seem to be involved in. I'm going to be doing some interviews or taking part in some of the content that's happening over that weekend, which is in November. And here's some hot news in from our very own Synth Fest that I've just got off the phone with Sound on Sound magazine, and they're saying, yeah, maybe we are going to do something. So what they're planning to do is something kind of as simple and community driven as possible. They're going to set up the Synthfest website as a portal to pull in all sorts of different content from different places, and that's going to be like a singular source of new product demos, things from manufacturers, seminars, previous content, new content, deals from manufacturers. Really, they kind of want to pull it all together for 48 hours over the weekend of the 10th of October to give a single place for everyone to go to see what all the latest stuff is in the world of synthesizers and modular. They're not generating any specific content themselves, but they will be using a logo and a Synthfest hashtag to throw around the place for people who want to co-opt into the idea of making a Synthfest weekend something that's worth looking at. So I might be doing some stuff over that. I have considered live streaming my seminar on getting started in Eurorack, something like that. Maybe I'll do that over that weekend. We shall see. But the Synthfest website is just being fleshed out at the moment, and there should be more information about all the stuff that's going to be going on around there coming soon. Otherwise, of course, we're looking towards a virtual NAMM at the beginning of next year, and what that will mean, if it will mean anything. Maybe it's time to knock these sorts of things on the head. Maybe it's too much work and getting all these things into a small time frame. Or maybe that's really useful because it gives you an opportunity to spend a weekend focused on what's new and what could be coming out that following year. Don't know. It's interesting, isn't it? Not quite sure what's the best way to go forward with those sorts of things, or whether the online experience is great or not. But then for many of us who aren't able to get to the shows, the online experience is kind of all we have, and so it's no different. And in fact, we get more content if it's all virtual, because it becomes more of a focus and everybody is trying to demonstrate their projects online. So, swings and roundabouts. I don't know. We just like stuff. More stuff. Give us more stuff, please. Instrument of Things TBD. To be determined. Ha ha ha. It's a Eurorack module that can be whatever you want it to be. Whatever you dream, you can program into this thing. It's a module. It gives you a bunch of patch points, a bunch of knobs, and you can map them to whatever you like. It's an open source project with a DSP inside that can already run things like the mutable instruments, plats and rings and those sorts of bits and pieces, but you can program your own whatever you like inside. You can build algorithms, thread them together. You could, if you want to get down to to right down to the level, you can program stuff in C++ and then create algorithms which you then thread together in a more of a web style drag and drop type interface. So it could potentially be the place where you could start building your own Eurorack modules. Very interesting. Am I ever going to do that? It seems unlikely, to be honest, but I like the idea of it. Very much like the idea of programming my own Eurorack module. But what would I make it do? I don't know. I've got too much stuff to do already, I think. But anyway, the 2BD from the Instrument of Things. Now everyone's going bonkers over the Polybrute. Polybrute from Arturia, a sort of synthesizer that we kind of saw coming to some degree. Everyone looking at the Matrix Brute thought, yeah, you could do a polyphonic version of that, as in a properly polyphonic version of that, because as Mark Doty will no doubt tell you, the Matrix Brute is indeed 3-note polyphonic with paraphonic articulation. But let's not go down that road. This is a truly polyphonic analog synthesizer with 6 voices. Only 6, which is perhaps the only thing that people go, 6 voices, is that really quite enough? But otherwise, people are just going bonkers. It seems like everybody got, well, not everyone, I didn't get one, obviously, but nearly lots of people got them and were able to put together these pretty awesome demos of what this thing can do. What makes it interesting is, well, it's got some interesting control and morphing going on. The idea is that you can put together 2 patches and morph between them. Well, all right, that's nice. But it's got more than that. It's also got a rather nice ribbon controller in the wood between the keyboard and the control panel. Ooh, so kind of CS80 style sweeping up and down. But there's more. It's also got a bit of a brick, a wooden lump over on the left where the mod wheel usually is, which gives you that kind of strange expressional XY pad kind of macro control over stuff. A bit like the Expressive E Touche, but apparently this is very unique and never ever been thought of before. But those combination of things looks like it gives it a very expressive and very performance orientated feel. I mean, otherwise it's just a polyphonic synthesizer, but a good one, high quality one. It sounds like you want it to sound. All the sounds coming out just go, it seems like it's big and it's evolving and it's interesting. Those sorts of things that make us think about Oberheims and Prophet 5s and those kinds of vibes, I think. It has a bit of a matrix, not quite the size of matrix that the Matrix Brute has, which for me is good, because I never liked the look of that great big buttons, that great big array of buttons over there on the right on the Matrix Brute. The fact that that's calmed down a little bit is, I think, awesome. Otherwise, you get 2 oscillators per voice, you get a pair of filters that you can use in series and parallel, a whole bunch of effects, modulators and LFOs, all the usual sort of things that you expect to find. So it's going to be a familiar environment to play, along with a little bit of shenanigans in the background with a little bit of menu diving and bits and pieces. But it looks great, sounds fantastic. I mean, what more could you want? It's over $2,000 though, so it's a hefty chunk. Polyphonic synthesizer, but great. I think they appear to have knocked it out of the park with this thing, and I can't wait to have a go. Our friend Kim Bjorn is at it again with another one of his books, Patch and Tweak. This is Patch and Tweak, the Moog edition. So Patch and Tweak, if you're not aware of Kim's work, it's these superb coffee table style books that just explore synthesis and design. He's got one on guitar pedals, got one on interface design, and one on Eurorack and Modular. And he's now produced one along with Moog, talking to the engineers and the designers and all the people at Moog Music in order to flesh it out into a Moog specific tome of awesomeness. I mean, there's history in there, there's patching, there's stuff all about the Mother 32s and subharmonicons, and also about the bigger stuff, the modular stuff, the matriarchs, the current stuff, the old stuff. Great. I mean, it's just a fabulous piece of work, and it pulls together all sorts of feelings and vibes, and if you like, takes a snapshot of Moog as it is at the moment. What a great thing. All the best with it, mate. And while we're talking about Moog, they've also done something quite extraordinary. They've drained all of the colour out of the grandmother and the matriarch, and they're calling it sort of classic vintage style. It's really interesting. It's like they're completely different products, and yet all they've done is restyled them in that good old standard classic vintage black kind of vibe. I'm in sort of two minds about it. I mean, on the one hand, it just looks flipping amazing. I mean, they've nailed it as far as making it look like old vintage gear. It looks fantastic. It sits next to all the other bits and pieces they do, like the Mother 32, the Subharmonicon, the DFAM. Looks brilliant. There's this video with Lisa Belladonna performing with this array of their little semi-modulars and then the matriarch and the grandmother. Just dreamy. Totally dreamy. Wow. But on the other hand, the colour, man. Can't lose the colour. I love the colourful grandmother and matriarch. I think it was just genius and awesome that it blasts in there with a fresh, vibrant, kind of fun, groovy, vintage, awesome 70s feel, just explosion of stuff. Inspirational, I thought. And it really breaks into the kind of machismo of the black and silver that synthesizers seem to always have, and just released us into the idea that it's okay to be colourful. It's okay, don't have to be professional all the time with our colour and design choices. So in some ways it kind of feels, oh really, did you have to do that? But wow, do they look great. So now I'm faced with the dilemma of which one would I have if I could have one. You know, I really don't know. I think the colour one, I think I prefer the colour. I just think it's such a statement. It looks fantastic. And as I said, I am into using my eyes as well as my ears because they're going to sound the same. But something about the colour choices, the design choice they made on that, which I think is outstanding. So what do you feel about that? The black or the coloured? The IK Mixbox. Now, I don't talk about effects very often. Don't know why. Software effects, I guess. Don't know, they don't always inspire. But there's a new one from IK Multimedia. Yeah, I've always got a soft spot for IK. I've known them for a very, very long time. And they make both plastic crap and awesome things. They manage to do the entire range. But when it comes to modeling effects in things like T-Rax and Amplitude, it's always outstanding. And they've released a new product called Mixbox, and it really appeals. I mean, I don't know about you, but I struggle with mixing effects. You know, if I'm mixing something in a DAW, when it comes to the processing, you know, if I'm trying to do something creative and interesting, that's fine. I've got no problem with effects. It's trying to do the stuff that you're supposed to do as a sound engineer, because I'm not a sound engineer and I don't really know how to do that stuff. So I'm forever using sort of preset channel vocal effects or channel drum effects and trying to get them to sound good and not really know what I'm doing half the time. And so when it comes to effects, what appeals to me is a good, interesting preset engine and a fantastic GUI, because that always helps. If something looks right, that visual indication of what's going on to me is just enormously helpful. The Mixbox things seems to really nail that. So what have they done? They've taken a whole bunch of effects, modeled them and stuck them into a rack, which to me makes some kind of sense. Because again, I end up with different plugins inserted that you can only open one at a time here and one at a time there, or if you're trying to line them up next to each other, they don't really work in a coherent space. With this, you've got the whole lot in this sort of Series 500 version of a rack. That means it's very reminiscent of Modular, very much like Eurorack, but is in the effects styling. So you've got all these different effects running next to each other you can chain together and have everything visually there, so you can see and hear what's happening at the same time. I like that. It appeals to me, and it ends up being this enormous channel strip that you can use again and again, and you're not having to worry about trying to find different plugins from different places. You know, you've got your favorite channel strip you had set up, which has got a Waves plugin in it and an own brand one and something from Unity and something from here, all these different effects kind of clobbed together to try to create this channel strip in your DAW. And then you've got to re-find all of those when you move to another system or bring it back in, and then it gets which way round. You know, it just gets a bit cumbersome. Whereas something like this can provide you with all of the channel strip you could possibly need using 70 different effects you can configure however you like, and it comes up as a single plugin. That really does appeal. Obviously, there's other things that do this probably, but this jumped out at me. That looks great. I can get started with it straight away. I understand it just to look at it. That's what you need. That's what you want. Instruo have just released their own take on the classic pin matrix. Pin matrix is a way of connecting inputs to outputs. Inputs coming in on the left, outputs going out the bottom. Stick a pin in, that input goes to that output. Very simple. It's what modulation matrices are sort of based upon, and we find it on old synthesizers like the Synth EMS and VC3 and that kind of thing. And it's becoming a bit of a thing just at the moment. It seems to be very much in vogue. But rather than just following the straightforward idea of pinning one thing to another, Instruo have done slightly interesting things with this. All of the patch points are TRS, so stereo mini jack, if you like, and that gives it a number of different possibilities. It comes supplied with a bunch of little looped TRS cables, and they act just like a pin matrix. Plug it in, that goes in there, goes around the loop and back out to here. But because it's TRS, if you plug in a regular mono cable, you can just route stuff straight out. So one input can suddenly go to 6 multiple destinations. It becomes a mult without it then being routed back to the outputs. So 1 in, 6 out. Fantastic. The other thing you can do is insert effects or something else. So you plug in a Y cable, a split TRS cable, and the signal go out one, put it through an effects processor, and back in to the matrix, and then routed out the output. So, like, phenomenally versatile just by deciding to put the patch points in as TRS and those little looped cables rather than as just a single make a connection type matrix. Fascinating. You can create all sorts of things in that I can't possibly ever dream of, but DivKid's done an awesome video on it that will take you through the whole lot. But it's a fantastic thing. Is it the sort of thing that I would have in my rack? I'm not entirely sure I'd know exactly what to do with it. It's the sort of thing that would be really useful to people who have a plan. If you've got a plan and you've got sections of your rack sorted out that you know what's going on and know what you want to do in different directions, that's the sort of thing that would really work for you, I think. Finishing us off then is the reveal of the Behringer Pro800. It is a clone of the sequential circuits Prophet 600. Why 800? I don't know. I think because it's got more voices or something. Anyway, so the Prophet 600 is this lovely keyboard. It's kind of like a cut price version of the Prophet 5. Prophet 5 was their first polyphonic synthesizer. The Prophet 600 sort of came in slightly cheaper, slightly simpler, but had the majority of the features of the Prophet 5 just in a slightly more pocket-friendly way. And over the years, it's been one of those synthesizers which knocks around on the second-hand market at relatively reasonable prices. And there's been a lot of modding that's gone on with it, a lot of improvements added to it by certain people, including a guy called Gleegly, who Behringer have brought in to work on this for them. And so what they've done is they've taken off the keyboard, thrown that out, taken the front panel, squashed it down to that size they like the Pro 1, like the Neutron, like the Model D, all those sorts of ones in that same Eurorack friendly size. They've stuffed all the controls in there, but they've kept the slightly strange old-fashioned computerized preset system and jammed that on the end. Now, I've kind of remarked on social media that I thought it didn't really look very nice. It seems like squashed and coupled together, whereas you go from this beautiful Prophet 600 keyboard with this interesting and quirky computerized system for presets over here, and then you've kind of cut it down, cut that bit out, stuff that in there, take the computer bit, stuff that in, and it looks like a sort of a cash register bolted onto the side of a Pro 1. I know, it's just a bit weird. I mean, what is probably undoubtedly going to be fantastic is that you get an 8-voice analog synthesizer based on the Prophet 600 for under 600 quid. I mean, that's extraordinary. And if you're into those kinds of synths, you can increase your rack, and it gives us a sign of things to come. Inevitably, will there be a Prophet 5? Will there be more and more polyphonic synthesizers in that kind of space? Seems remarkable. It's almost like Behringer are turning into a plug-in format. Because they're almost virtual instruments, but they're hardware, proper instruments. But because they all seem to share the same form factor and size and end up kind of racked together, it becomes, I don't know. See, it's me and my visuals again, you see. I'd like an instrument to be an instrument. I like something individual in that, something that's been crafted and thought about and put together. This doesn't feel like it's been thought about at all. I'm sure the sound has been thought about, the technology's been thought about, but that interface design is just like, we've got to cram it into that space. Right, just cram it into that space. And there you are. Whew. Don't know, I think there's something lost in that personally, but otherwise flippin' heck, an 8-voice analog synthesizer under 600 quid. I mean, compare that to the Polybrute, which is over £2,000. Can you compare them? I have no idea. I wouldn't dare say anything of the sort. I'll leave that entirely up to you. So there you go, that's that. I think I don't have a big and finally, other than to talk about the DIY week again, which is next week, starting from the 27th, live streaming almost every night, talking about soldering, DIYing, doing live soldering and interviews with Steve from Thonk, getting into all sorts of stuff, Dekar's Dream, Cosmo, a couple of kits we're going to build together, and all sorts of stuff coming up during the week that I'm hopefully trying to do as we go. I've just finished uploading a guide to soldering, so do go and check that out. It's a bit long, it's nearly an hour, but I don't know, I kind of felt I wanted to just give a flavour of what the live streams are going to be like in trying to do something a bit more long form, talk about it conversationally, because I've seen a lot of quick videos on how to solder, and they're useful, yeah, but sometimes you just need the time to unwind and think about these things and how they impact one another. And then I actually showed the soldering of a kit in the middle, so you know, half of it is at least soldering something together. So do go and check that out and join us for the week. It will be exciting, I think. It will be intense. And it's all subject to change, so we'll see what happens as we go along. So do stay in touch and keep updated on what is going to happen next. Otherwise, please feel free to subscribe, to join our Patreon team, which has been great recently. We've really had a little bit of a bump, which is really, really helpful in helping me put together more videos and focus on what I'm doing and having a great bit of contact with the people over there. So do please consider that as something you can do, and in the meantime, go make some tunes.